speaker today is Pamela Ellis, MBA, PhD. She's better known as the Education Doctor. She's an award-winning educational consultant whose experience includes advising school districts, community organizations, and institutes of higher education. She's the host of the Keep Calm for Mom show on LinkedIn Live, a show that discusses what it means to educate the next generation of leaders with grace and ease. During the Boss Mom series episodes, she engages in real talk with boss moms on the joys and myths of juggling work-life balance. She's visited more than 500 colleges and universities internationally to gain insight into their varying cultures and to explore the range of academic and social opportunities available to students on campus. Her research areas include high school to college transition, parent engagement, African American males in education, and college completion. She's a highly sought-after speaker and author of the best-selling book, What to Know Before They Go, College Edition, which helps school leaders, counselors, mentors, and parents, caregivers support teens towards higher education success. Dr. Pamela graduated from Stanford University and the Tux School of Business at Dartmouth College, and she earned a doctorate from the Stanford University School of Education. No big deal. Please welcome Dr. Pamela Ellis.
Thank you so much, Amanda.
That's the advance, that one pointed that way.
Okay, great, thank you. Thank you all so much for having me here this afternoon. I want to start out with just asking you, okay. I wanted to just start out with asking you, if you will, please, if you can just close your eyes for a moment. It'll just be a moment. And what I'd like you to think about is, think about these last 24 months with all that's happened in terms of COVID, being quarantined, the social unrest that's happened. Everything that we've been through in those 24 months, I'd like you to think about how you have felt with everything that's gone on. And think about one word that describes how you have felt in these last 24 months. And then now you can open your eyes. On the table, I have placed some index cards. And I'd like you to just write down that one word that describes how you felt about these last 24 months. So if you could please write that down. Does everyone have an index card? Awesome. Don't have a pen, okay. So if I could have a couple of volunteers to share what your word was. Yes. Will you share your word with the gray sweater? Yes.
Oh, me?
Yes.
Okay, fatigue. Fatigue.
Fatigue.
Yes.
Okay. What were some other words? Yes.
Disconnected.
Disconnected.
Helpless.
Helpless. Yes.
I actually feel grateful.
Grateful. Okay. That's an interesting one. We'll come back to that. Okay. Good. Yes. One more.
Nostalgic.
Nostalgic. Okay. So, yes.
Unnerved.
Unnerved. All right. A good variety of words and emotions. So as you think about those words that you just heard and also what your own word was around your feelings, think about how it felt for our young people, especially our teenagers, and what words they would use to describe these last 24 months. So with that, what I'm going to be talking about during my time here is just the experiences that I had with teenagers experiencing the last 24 months, and findings from that time that really speak to how higher education is changing and will be changed indelibly. So there were 3 key shifts in terms of how students made their decisions around their college selection. And I work with students year over year in terms of determining where they're going to apply and where they'll eventually decide to enroll. So before I get more into talking about those findings, I do want to share a little bit more about my background, because I'm probably one of the most unlikely persons to be having this conversation with you. But I want to share that backstory in terms of how I got here. So not only am I a first-generation college graduate, I am also a first-generation high school graduate. My mom finished 8th grade, and my dad finished 10th. And so when it came time for me to even think about applying to college, it was something that I just relied on books. I relied on help from my counselor and others to really figure out my way in terms of applying to colleges. Now, one of the interesting things about my mom's reaction was that her reaction to me going to college was very similar to what I often see today with families, even when they have multiple degrees. My mom did not want me to go away to college, and especially to go away to a college that she had never heard of. So I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, and back then I recall sharing with some friends and others that I was going to be going to Stanford. And they said to me, "Is that in Connecticut?" So back then, people had not heard of Stanford, and so it was just a school that was on the other side of the country. And my mom and I took a Greyhound bus all the way from Memphis to Palo Alto. And when we got there, she gave me $70 to last me the whole school year. And you know something? I thought that was good money until I got to the bookstore the next day, and my books for the first quarter were $350. And so I had no idea of what I was getting into, nor what to really expect, in that experience. And much of that experience I share as a background because it really, drives the way I see this process for families. So not just for the teens, but also for the parents' experience, because many of those, feelings around, being afraid for their child to go away, all of that is still resonant today. And so with that, once I had children, though, that gave it another new perspective, if you will, in terms of the work that I do. So my background, Amanda shared earlier a couple of things in terms of being a mom. My oldest on the right there just finished at Georgetown, and my son on the left, he just finished at Stanford. They both graduated at the same time because of COVID. My daughter is now a sophomore at Oberlin College. And so not only have I gone through this experience with countless other teens, but also with my own teens as well. And so I want to share with you those 3 key findings from the work that I've seen over the last 24 months that's really going to shape higher education. As I am working with students, one of the things that I want to just kind of give you a definition of, because it's one of those terms that's often thrown around that people aren't sure exactly what it means or how it's actionable in any way. And that's the whole notion of fit. And so we often will hear about, students finding the right college or a college that's a fit for them. What I have developed over the years is a framework that helps students with looking at fit and understanding it based on 5 factors. Those 5 factors are academic, social, financial, cultural, and vocational. So those are the 5 areas of fit. And so as I'm working with students over the last couple of years, it's been, with that understanding that their search for colleges is around colleges that are a good fit for them. And what I saw in that, though, is just how COVID reshaped, just their decisions around which college they would choose. So all of the colleges that they were applying to were a good fit, but it's kind of like, well, how do we then determine where we're going to go? And I talk about it in terms of pre and post-COVID because there are a lot of students that I've worked with over the years pre-COVID and saw the way they made their decisions, but this particular time brought about some new ways of thinking about where they were going to spend the next 4 years. So one of the first shifts that I'll talk about is the emphasis on community. Community and having that sense of community in their college experience was very important for a lot of students and drove their decision, even beyond what the finances may have dictated. So even if it was a college that, they didn't get as much scholarship money, they still found that, the community was important enough for them to make that decision. And I can share an example with my own daughter. So she was in that class of 2020 that missed out on prom, missed out on graduation. She had actually had a trip planned to go to Paris for one of their service offerings the first week of March. And they canceled that trip, and everything just was canceled from then on, as far as all of the culminating experiences that she was looking forward to as a highlight of K-12. And so when it came time, though, to make her decisions around colleges, she had received a number of acceptances, a number of awards along with those acceptances. But what really stood out about her experiences with Oberlin was the fact that they had brought together students across the country who were also admitted to start to build community. And I've seen that experience with a number of other colleges around the same time as well, with how they were really supporting students with building community early on before they even got to campus. And that was something that drove her decision around where she would go. There were a couple of other colleges that she was really excited for, but when it came down to it, her decision around where she could have a community really made a difference. And community is part of that social fit that I talked about earlier. Now, my work is around high school to college transition. That's my research area. And I also look at transitioning from middle school to high school. Very similar phases. And one of the things we already know in terms of students transitioning in freshman year of college is that that social piece is very significant. And it really makes a difference as far as retention, even when they can integrate into a community socially. So that was one key distinction in terms of pre and post-COVID decisions, was that need and desire for a sense of community. The second one is more pertinent to students of color, especially Black students. So during the last year and a half, more students of color are not only applying to, but also enrolling in HBCUs, which are historically Black colleges and universities. They've seen their numbers increase in ways that they hadn't seen in previous years. Now, I saw this with my students, my Black students that I worked with, that were clients, that they were applying to colleges, and even prior to, those colleges had not been on their list. And some of that, in part, was driven by parents, also wanting them to at least consider those colleges that in many cases can be seen as safe havens, places where they can build community, places where they can have that cultural fit for them as well. One of my students in the class of 21 applied to 16 colleges, and he was admitted to 15 of those 16 colleges. Now, he received in total scholarship awards $1.8 million. And that was from all of the colleges. A couple of them were really full ride scholarships from some very strong STEM schools. And for him, he decided that he would go to Howard University. And mind you, Howard's financial package wasn't as strong as some other colleges, but certainly he and his family saw that as being a stronger fit for him and the things that he wanted to do career-wise. And so that was the choice there. But I had not seen that kind of interest in HBCUs prior to the last couple of years. Now, one of the things that I was talking with a colleague about recently is that it was interesting to me in that that increase in interest was more so for my male students sometimes than my female students. And I think it may be because of the imbalance, the gender imbalance sometimes at HBCUs that drove that distinction. But that was certainly something different and will play a role in terms of even how HBCUs operate. So for example, here in our great state, we have Central State and Wilberforce University. Now, Wilberforce is private, Central State is a public institution, and even though they're located next door to one another, they really never cross-pollinated, if you will, in terms of their activities and offerings. But due to everything that's happened in the last 2 years, those campuses as well as other HBCUs have started to work together in order to maintain their financial strength and stability is really a big part of that. And so with Central State and Wilberforce, they're even sharing dorms. And so they have where students from both campuses can be at the same residence hall, which is something they did not have before, but certainly a silver lining. The third shift is around what's been taking place at the colleges. And one of the things that we've seen that's really been another silver lining is all of the services and offerings for mental health and really supporting students' mental wellness. And that's something that's definitely been driven from what's happened in the last 2 years. Certainly prior to 2020, there had already been an escalation as far as more students being stressed out, and colleges recognizing that, but they hadn't necessarily taken all of the measures to support students who were stressed out and in some cases having, breakdowns during college. The type of offerings that colleges have, which is new for them in many ways, is that they're offering more wraparound services. And when I say wraparound, that's the fact that not only is it support for students, but also for staff and faculty as well, offering professional development, offering services around mindfulness, stress management in a way that had not been done previously. And so with these 3 changes that have occurred over the last 2 years, we know that students have many of those frustrations that you talked about earlier, and things like feeling anxious, frustrated throughout this time. There have still been those silver linings that speak to how students are really forefronting their mental health in what's a good fit for them, and making sure that when they go on to their next place, it's one where they can be supported and have that sense of community that they long for after having been quarantined over these years. So with that, are there any questions? Yes, thank you.
Would you say, in retrospect, now looking at the health result, has COVID been good for anything? Has it improved situations anywhere?
Well, I would say within education, it's definitely shown educators, and especially even in K-12, that you can do things remotely. I don't think that remote has worked for every student, but certainly there are some that it has worked for. And I say that because some years back, I was working on a project for Ohio Department of Education, and it was looking at how classroom teachers were using technology. And the short of the finding is that they really weren't using technology, and there was a lot of resistance to using technology, or feeling like you were going to let the computer, take away their jobs. But I think that now, with everything that's happened, a silver lining is that it's like, yes, we can see that, for some students this can work, and there is a way that it can be done where students can work, remotely and still be productive. I mean, I saw some students who certainly had some social issues at school who were really thriving with being able to work online and, doing a hybrid model where they were going into school maybe only a couple of days a week, but using the other time to work online. So that's a plus that I can readily speak to and definitely saw. Yes?
Has there been a change in the percentage of high school seniors going to college today as compared to, maybe 10 years ago? Are they gravitating a little more towards, technical schools, or learning a trade, or manufacturing work, or what's happening?
It's been a mix, and it's been in pockets. And what I mean by pockets is, in some certain parts of the country, yes, you may still have that high college-going rate. In others, it's shifted a bit. And I have seen more interest in doing bridge or gap year programs immediately after high school, as a way to have that time to just figure out what it is they want to do. And so it comes in all shapes, and different communities are experiencing it differently as far as whether more students are taking a route to go into trade school, or if they're doing a 4-year, or just taking time off. Yes.
So right here. With the Intel's announcement of the $20 billion they're going to be investing just east of Columbus in the plant, what should we be doing to help get our workforce prepared for all those jobs that are going to be available in 3 years?
How to prepare the workforce?
Students graduating from high school, for example.
I would think if there's an opportunity to make some connections with students earlier in terms of if there are any type of mentoring opportunities where you can bring together employees and students at the high school level, sponsoring those high schools as a way to be part of some of their programming, so that once students are graduated, they know of the different opportunities that are there for them. So those are a couple of ways that I think we could prepare for that. Yes.
Do you have a sense of what the staying power of these trends are? In other words, do you think they're going to revert back, the decision-making process is going to revert back to where it was pre-pandemic, or is this something that's probably going to become permanent?
I think with, certainly with the changes that the colleges are making, those will probably be around a bit longer. I'm anxious to see how some of the students who are in the class of 23 are going to transition into college, because these are the students who didn't have a freshman year of high school because of the pandemic. And I think that will be telling. And so some of it is still to be seen as far as how students' choices will be impacted. But at the college level, I think that will be around longer as far as how they're operating, because they're certainly making those investments, and they see the importance of it in terms of the relationships, the community that they're building on campus, and it's hard to retract that in any way because it's certainly necessary. Yes, one last question.
In your research, have you seen any much older research about the effects of the Spanish flu on transitions?
No. And you were the one who had nostalgia, yes.
I grew up being very aware of the Spanish flu and its effects.
Yes. So great. Well, thank you all so very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ellis. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you next week.